I've been around since 2015 in Ethereum. How many people have been around since more than 3 years in the Ethereum space? All right, okay. More than 5? Okay, good. Good, then you might have heard about the Mist browser. Actually, that was the concept video that Alex van der Sande, the UX designer of Ethereum, did. And he created this video in November 2014. And he basically came up with this idea of, let's create a Web3 browser, where we can visit decentralized applications. And he literally came up with lots of things. I mean, you already see like a tradable company, transparent democracy, pretty much DAOs, right? Marketplaces, obviously, and exchanges, and crowdfunding, and escrow, and family trust, and pretty much not even everything we have built yet. In a video in 2014 you can find on YouTube, which is, it was quite a foresight, I would say, that Alex had here. And this was before the network was started. So that was really just inspired by the ideas that were around, through the white paper. So I joined then in 2015 in January, because Alex and some people in the team, they were looking actually for someone to help with building this idea. And that's what we did. We built the Mist browser, which was also the Ethereum wallet, and then people called it the Mist wallet, and it got all very confusing because the idea was that the Ethereum wallet is one D app in the Mist browser, and then we also released a version that was standalone, and then people were all confused. Anyway, it was probably a very good looking wallet at the time, and I just found a video that had literally lots of those cool screenshots that I haven't seen in over 10 years myself. But you had like these accounts, and you could give them little names, and there were also smart contract accounts. I mean, believe it or not, but the Ethereum wallet had smart contract accounts because you couldn't see any transactions thanks to, I guess, Gavin's choice, probably. And also saving data on your node, right? You can't see past transactions. So we had to actually deploy a smart contract to make that happen. And Gavin actually wrote that smart contract. He wrote the first multisig, which also became then the official multisig of ETH there for a very long time. And that's what we used in the Mist browser. So you literally got a multisig smart contract account out of the box. You just needed to deploy it. That means you needed to get Ether, which made it all a bit more complicated. Also, the Mist browser and the Ethereum wallet ran a full node. That was pretty fine for the first few months. Syncing was kind of done in a few minutes. Then as the months passed, that got a little slower. Here we see some nice transaction screens. I made it here with like a progress bar that was going through. But I mean, we got outcompeted by probably the more ugly version of the wallets of today that have tremendously changed in UI since 2017, as you can see. But the idea was really like that, the big idea of the Metamask was to not run a full node and just use an RPC endpoint, and then you basically get your instant login. And making it a browser extension, which was pretty useful too. We kind of had to make up all the way of how you talk to an app in the browser. We had to make this up for the Mist browser, and that's what also the Metamask used. And that was in 2015, and also in the same year, I took a proposal from Vitalik, created a proper specification, and called it Ethereum request for comment to get some comments in. That turned out to be pretty quickly the idea of the century. No, the specification of Ethereum for tokens, and pretty much blew everything out of the water when it comes to Ethereum. So ERC20 then it kicked off this whole wave of standardization, and it kicked off the whole wave of tokens, and the rest is history, right? DeFi, ICOs. pretty much all of this came out of this, and a lot of DApps, because of a single standard. So this was kind of like my work at Ethereum, working, on the Mist browser, also Web3.js, which I didn't add a slide for. Proposing this, that was really no work. I mean, we just took like a proposal, changed it up, and wrote a spec. That was 1 hour of work. Then we discussed a little bit, and out came the whole mess that Ethereum is today. But there is actually a standard that I then proposed like 2 years later. We're going here like forward in time. And that was a bit more by coincidence in a way. So I had a workshop, with like a consulting workshop, and the idea was to think about a SmartCon account. And I came up with an idea, and after I got home, I thought, okay, I should make a proposal. And I created ERC 725. For the ones who know their standards history, that's in 2017. There was the exact proposal after 721, which is now the NFT standard. So I came up with this Ethereum identity standard. I call it actually a proxy account, right there. I called it a proxy account. Later, this was translated probably to account abstraction. I called it the proxy account. And the idea was basically use a smart contract instead of as an account instead of like just an EOA. But there was also a bit more than the idea of what we had in the Mist browser, which was the multisig. So I proposed that standard, and that kind of like created this whole little battle between Uport, which came from Consensus, because they wanted to make the Ethereum standard, and then they all got pissed that this didn't suddenly got attention, and I had actually no interest to get any attention on this. I just thought I'd put it out there, and then somebody does something with it. So Uport like kind of tried to explain why this is not a good idea, blah blah blah. On the end, didn't happen. Okay, there's a bit of a double slide here. So what happened is it was kind of lingering for a little bit. But I also realized, then in 2017-18, like we have this big problem that kind of with all of this cool tech, and obviously ICOs were a thing, and DeFi was a thing. But I mean, we didn't really have any users, and funny enough, we are still today at the same position, right? We barely have any actual smart contract interactions except for DeFi trading, and maybe lending something and swapping something. But where are the DAOs? The actual DAOs, not like those $10 billion DAOs, that hold a protocol token. But where are the people, right? And the problem is really, it's really hard to use, and if you make a bunch of calculations, you can probably come up with this assumption. So that nobody's using blockchain. I mean, even in crypto conferences, it's hard to find people to actually do something with a DApp. Then in 2018, I decided to leave the Ethereum Foundation in August with this nice little emoji and walking out of the room here. And that's because I started my own project called Luxa. And the idea was here really to change this whole thing up. How can we make this useful? And yeah, ERC-75 account, what I showed there was quite an important thing. Long story short, 23 we started the network, and it's actually exactly like Ethereum. So it's actually a clone of Ethereum. It's not an L2, sorry, it's an L1, but it's the exact same thing like Ethereum and run with 120,000 validators. And why did I do that? And the answer is standard proposals. That's actually the reason why really Luxa exists in the first place. And probably, as you realize, by now there's thousands of standard proposals, and there's a whole like discussion, battle, and everything. And probably a lot of people in Ethereum kind of like don't like me so much that I went somewhere else, started a whole new chain. And on top of this, make all standards completely somewhere else than where everybody is debating. The answer is, it's really hard to get adoption around a whole set of new standards that fundamentally work different and change the foundations if we do that on old, outdated standards that were just made up on a whim, and then somehow everything happened from that, and we have a network effect around something we literally can't change. So you probably know how long sometimes one single standard debate, takes. I think 4337, it's a bunch of standards combined into one because it was too complicated to get agreement around even one of those, right? Just make a monster standard and say this is it. So what happens if you have, and that basically this whole process took 5 years. But what happens if you have a lot of new standards ideas and you want to fix all the stuff, like the tokens and the NFTs, and allow that there's any kind of metadata that you can attach and be more flexible and inform each other and all this kind of stuff. So it gets more complicated when you want to build foundational building blocks that are not just all kind of like a version of ERC20 with one extra thing. And even more complicated is, and we have that discussion right now in Ethereum, if you come up with a whole smart contract account. So when I started this whole thing in 2017, it was just one basic idea. Turned out that is a very good fundament for actually creating a real smart contract account. That's what universal profiles is. I mean, not to go too much into technical detail, but it's actually funny because I just wrote yesterday, Jeffrey, by accident, or by coincidence, actually, Jeffrey Wilker. He's the founder of Go Ethereum. He's the one who hired me building the Mist browser. And yesterday I just saw his message popping up in Discord because he was writing in his Discord, which I'm also in, about his game, Grid Online, the game he's building. And he's the one who literally in 2015 in March told us that we should not expose a public key in the Mist browser to users or to the apps. They should only see a smart contract account, and they should never see the private key or the public key of the private key. Because that's stuff that's not really persistent, and ideally they can change it, and it should be ephemeral and not like something you really use. So 9 years later, like for real, 9 years later, there's a smart contract account, and there has been lots of obviously directions. I mean, Gnosis, build a multi-sig, and a modular account system. But there is this benefit of being in this space where you don't have so much noise and you have to debate every single change with lots of people, and it's a very slow progression, specifically when you don't want to do something more complex where you have multiple contracts that have to interact with each other and permission systems and key managers and all of this stuff. It's sometimes better to just step out, go to a different kitchen, cook there, make the meal, and then come back and say, here, look, try that, And I mean, these smart contract accounts work equally on Ethereum, and we build a browser extension that we will open up to Ethereum as well. And on the end, the beautiful thing is if you do it the right way, it looks under the hood, or looks for the app developer just the same way it looks for an EOA, right? It's the same exact thing. So this is the beautiful thing about smart contracts, solidity, and all of this stuff. You can make things look extremely simple. But you can also make it then look nice, and it then actually becomes a real account. And that's kind of like the story, how I came from accidentally proposing something and then really going down the rabbit hole into standards proposals, and created a whole set of them now that can also be very useful and will hopefully be very useful to Ethereum and any of the other EVM chains, because it is a smart contract account that is a wallet at the same time. It's your account. It can be extended and can have information, can have everything that you need in one account, one smart contract, as the core, how I call it, the root identity of yourself. Yeah, any questions?
Okay, questions? Running?
Hi, just a simple one. You said that it's long to go through the standard creation. What's here the process? How is you shorten the time from initial creation to sort of implementation?
I mean, I skipped over that slide. It was from 2018 to pretty much 23. So it's not short. It's like 6 years of like, it's quite a while. I mean, it took a minute to build this. How to shorten this? I mean, I guess if this would have been in the ERC space, I would be at like 10% of that complexity by now. And still I wouldn't have an agreement on nothing. So, yeah.
Hi. Can you go into detail why you think you had this like screenshot with the chat message where you said it was useful to expose the public key? Can you go into detail why it's useful?
No, it should not be useful. He should not expose the public key. So the idea is like, rather than giving a Dapp a public key, which the user can lose, right, where you really don't have any ability to attach information or do anything kind of complex, give them a smart contract that hopefully can have multiple public keys or multiple private keys controlling it and so on and so on. And he had this idea in March 2015, literally. I mean, when we were in Amsterdam, that's what he said. And Gavin had the exact same ideas, you know. And they already kind of could see it from the beginning that that's the way you should how should, you know, a Dapp should interact with people, not through a single key, but through a more complex system. But I also knew at the time that it's just, we have no standards and we would like not launch the Mist browser in any due time if you will come up now with inventing that thing. So it had to be just the key initially and the multisig.
Yeah, you were talking about like how it took very long to propose standards. Isn't that a trade-off of decentralization, or why you think it needs to be like? I guess that could be expected. It takes longer now than it used to take. So would it still be your main criticism? Is it mainly criticism about not being able to agree, or it being too long? Can you maybe?
So the thing is, I mean, consensus and agreement is important. But if you really want to create a foundation that's well thought out, that is not just like, you know, something simple like a token, but something like an account, right? An account should be manageable over time. Ideally, it should be not changing that much because otherwise Dapps have a hard time dealing with it. It should be, you know, reactable. It should react to whatever or something. It should hold information, so smart contracts can read information on it. So it needs to have all of the, it needs to be extensible. It have all of these properties. And if you just really talk, I mean, we have some ideas, you know, modular account system in Ethereum and so on, but it's very early in its design, and it's really not very that much standardized. And that already is 3 years or 4 years since they're thinking about it, right? So sometimes it's important to just start from scratch, think it through yourself, come up with an idea, then test it out, implement it. What took so long is really that all the different pieces needed to be standardized. We didn't want to make one custom account and say this is it, you know. We wanted to make a system that is completely flexible, works anywhere for any purpose, and is it's just unbiased, and that takes time. And then you have to build a lot of things on top of this to make it kind of visual. I mean, Knossasafe knows that, you know. You need to build a Knossasafe, you need to build an app and, you know, an extension and all of this stuff to really make it easy usable, right? We had to build the same stuff and transaction relay service that, you know, you don't even pay gas and la 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 la. So you build all of this stuff on top of this interface that it looks nice, and only then people can really see, oh, okay, that makes sense, you know. Oh, that's how the account can look like. That's how it can work. It takes time to, and imagine now you have a bunch of debates along the way. That would be, I mean, we had a bunch of debates internally, but at least there's one little dictator who could say, this is how we do it. So sometimes you need one kook and not like 10, you know.
And thank you very much for the presentation as well. I guess my question kind of stems off the past one as well. Not to make this entire evening a retrospective, but I'm curious, what is your takeaway? What's like the, if you had one more slide in the presentation, what does it say? In the context of, you know, I took a lot of what you said to be about technical debt and decisions that were made in the past, and, you know, things that impact that down the line, but also even just mentioned, you know, maybe it's better to have one chef and a bunch of sous chefs in the kitchen. Where does that fall on the line of, you know, Ethereum today gets a lot of critiques about decentralization and the way EIPs are developed and written and implemented. Where is this trade-offs? Where is the spectrum? How do we actually come together and think? I mean, I guess the meta point is that we have technical debt in all of our democracies in the world. In the EU, you have massive technical debt to even establish an organization. I don't even know how the Department of Decentralization exists in Germany as an organization with bureaucracy. So, what's the trade-off?
The name is a joke.
So what's the trade-off between going outside as you did versus working inside, and how does everyone participate in that system?
I mean, so sometimes it's necessary to step outside and to do it different, you know, and to make it, I mean, that is the only way sometimes things can move forward. It will otherwise take another X 10 years, and I mean, there's a lot of money and a lot of people and a lot of teams in the Ethereum ecosystem, and we count ourselves totally into that as well. But if you always try to really just like build up on the first idea, which is in this case ERC20, which everything else is literally like somehow bound to, then you are restricted and restrained in what you can do. Sometimes it's important to step out, do it different or do it right, rethink the foundation, and then come back in. And then Ethereum and other chains can learn from, for example, Luxa, where you see, okay, it works there. Oh wow, this is like can do this and this and this, and the tokens and all of these new features that are possible. Now maybe we should also start using this account system, or should use these new tokens for new projects. And that's how you can then inform the old. But transforming the old, I mean, I personally don't believe that's possible in that sense. I mean, not in any kind of reasonable time frame. So it's sometimes extremely important to just step out. And Luxa is literally Ethereum. I mean, the chain is Ethereum. It has a different set of validators. Started purely as a POS, and there has no proof of work phase, but apart from that, it runs, every Ethereum client runs Luxa as well, which I'm very thankful for, by the way, not gonna lie. But because that takes away the effort of making the actual chain. We can then innovate on what I know, you know, which is the standards and the front ends. And being the lead Dapp developer, I mean, okay, I was the only one. I was the Dapp developer, you know. That's what I knew, how to build interfaces and how to build developer tools. And that's literally what, you know, is combined in these universal profiles.
Okay, one last question here and then.
Hi, I didn't quite understand Luxa very well. Like you said, you're hoping Ethereum could benefit from what you did with Luxa, but it's not an L2, it's an L1. Like, how exactly could Ethereum, you know, to make use of Luxa? What's your plan for the future?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's this whole belief that L2s are somehow closer to Ethereum than any other EVM chain. I mean, not gonna lie, but that's complete bullshit. I mean, an L2 is nothing else than a separate network. Separate user, separate network. It just happened to write its state into Ethereum. But if you build a bridge, that bridge is probably not very secure either, right? I mean, we have a benefit here that there's, I mean, Gnosis has the same benefit. It's the same consensus algorithm like Ethereum, so you can even make a bridge that can two-way verify zero-knowledge proofs. So it's even a better bridge than any L2 bridge can be. How it benefits through the standards, you know? I mean, eventually, I mean, these standards run on any EVM chain, right? This is a complete, unbiased, totally open for everybody to use standard. Our browser extension will open up to Ethereum, already kind of opened up the base, will open up to other chains. You don't get all the bells and whistles of having all the other cool standards that all the projects will use. So you miss a little bit out on some cool automations that you would get, but you will have a proper account that you can manage with permissions and recovery and all this kind of stuff as well. So it's more about, you know, over time, the thing can grow. And because all of this is extensible, people can add now standards on top of a new foundation. Like they're adding on top of the foundation called ERC20, right? That's literally what everybody's adding on in some way. Now we can add on a different foundation, but you know, doing this on another chain, you can learn first. You can see, watch. Does it make sense? Does it work? You know, what do people build? What can be done? And then they realize, oh, I couldn't build that here. Maybe I do want to use that. So it's open standards on the end for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. A big round of applause.